So Jason asked me to do a segment on stage fright, and the first thing that came to mind was something that happened about 20 years ago that I have never spoken about to anyone until now. It happened during a very dark time in my life when I had sort of shut down in a lot of ways, including that I was unable to play piano at all. Not because of my fingers, but because I had lost my memory. I'd practice a piece for months and wake up in the morning and still be unable to remember what the first note was. For me, this was a 180-degree turn because before that, I could memorize anything, and it actually was easier for me to pull from my mind all the right notes than any wrong ones. For one example, my high school teacher once asked me to prepare Mozart's 21st Piano Concerto so I could help the student orchestra rehearse it and hear it with the piano part before the guest concert pianist would arrive, who would only rehearse with them once or twice. So my music teacher gave me the music on a Monday, and the following Wednesday, just 2 days later, I played the entire 30-minute concerto with the orchestra from memory. And another time, still in high school, I was given the Beethoven Piano and Woodwind Quintet one Friday and then performed it on the following Friday, 1 week later. The weird part of that story is that while we were waiting our turn to go on stage, I told the other students in my ensemble, I said, you know what? I feel like I can see the whole quintet in my head, and I'll bet I can perform this without even using the music. And they said, oh, Debbie, don't be crazy, just take the music. Well, I left the music backstage, never having tried to play it once without the book, because until then, it had never even occurred to me that maybe it was memorized. And I played it completely from memory with no slips at all. That's how good my memory was. So to go from that to playing a piece, any piece, for months and not even being sure where to place my hands on the first note was beyond bizarre and unnerving. And my teacher at the time suggested I see a psychologist because he said everyone loses memory gradually over time. They just don't lose it all overnight. But that is exactly what happened to me. And I finally did give a performance, a Bach suite, and I was freaking out the whole time. I was struggling just to remember one note after the other after the other. It was a nightmare, and I no longer got any happiness from being on a stage. So I buried myself for years in the one thing that truly made me happy, teaching music theory. So now, 20 years ago, and by now this was after years of not having touched the piano, my conductor friend Rich asked me to help him out. His youth orchestra was giving a concert in a couple of days, and the orchestral score had a harp part, and he didn't have a harpist. So he wanted to know if I could play the part on the piano. The part was extremely easy, and I just said yes. So I'm on stage with a big group of youth instrumentalists, and the piece begins. It was 4 movements long, but I only played in the 4th movement. So there I was during the 1st movement thinking, such pretty music. I just love 4A. Sounds like a walk in nature. That's funny. I wonder why my palms are sweating like crazy. And it's not hot here, so why can I suddenly not breathe? And there's an exit door, and why the hell can't I just run out of here? I had begun getting a panic attack before I even thought about it, while I was thinking about something completely unrelated. So when people try to tell you, oh, just think about the cosmos and how small and insignificant your performance really is relative to the universe, or just remember why you're doing it. You're doing it for your audience. It's not about you. Or just imagine the entire audience sitting on toilets. It doesn't work. Believe me, I know. Or, just be well prepared and you won't panic. Wrong. I had nothing to prepare. There was not a thing that could go wrong because the music could not possibly have been easier. I'm not saying a 5-year-old could have played it. I'm saying a goat could have played it. Bum, bum, bum. I can't describe how truly awful this event was. I had a look of complete terror on my face while waiting for those 3 interminable movements that I was not playing in to end. And I'd be looking out at the audience wanting desperately to run past them out of the room. And some of the students' parents in the audience were looking back at me with this confused expression, wondering what my problem was. And then I'd look up at Rich conducting, and he'd be looking back at me like he just hoped I'd get through this without making a scene. And needless to say, He never asked me again for any more favors. I was so mortified that I could not talk about this, and I never did talk about it. But after a while, I did heal enough to start to think about it, and in doing so, I realized something. And I think you really have to crash and burn like I did to figure this out. And that is, performance fear is not something you can control with thoughts, because the fear is not here. It's here. It's much deeper than just thinking it out. This is why your cosmic toilets and for the children and whatever will never get to the root of performance anxiety. The only real way you can not only face this demon, but turn it into actually one of the greatest things in the world is you have to practice. And I don't mean practice your scales or practice your repertoire. I mean practice performing. I had mentors in my life who helped with this, but till that moment, I never fully appreciated their wisdom. My first teacher who understood stage fright was a wonderful lady, Miss Nadia Reisenberg. She would sit beside me whenever she taught me, as most piano teachers do. But every 3 or 4 weeks, she would say, "Now, Debbie, you will be the performer and I will be your audience." And all she would do differently was just sit back a few feet. And that was enough to get my adrenaline shooting. This was the same lady I played for every Monday morning, 9 to 10 a.m. Yet the idea of giving a performance, even to her, had an effect on me. Another teacher, Mark, who would tell me before a recital, play the entire program once for someone, anyone. A few days later, do it again. And a few days later, again. So my recital performance would not be my first performance of my repertoire, it would be my 4th performance. Both Mark and Madame Reisenberg knew something back then that I did not. Just as with everything else, you have to practice doing something to make peace with something. So the reason I had freaked out on stage playing something that made chopsticks look like virtuoso repertoire was that prior to that experience, when I was in that dark place in my life and with no memory, I was for years out of practice being on a stage. And after that experience, it was also years before I played again in public. And the next time as well, I just kept thinking the whole time, get me out of here. But instead of running away, this time I slowly began to work against this dark place and I kept getting back on stage. Oh, there was one other suggestion that people had recommended, and I did try it once, and that was taking a beta blocker. So before one performance, I took an Inderal that another colleague had given me. And it did work. I performed, and I was not nervous at all. It was like going to the supermarket. And when I missed a note, I was like, oh, there goes that, whatever. I never took one again. Why? Because gone was the anxiety, but gone also were all the things about performing that makes it amazing and unlike anything else in the world. The rush, the adrenaline, the excitement that puts you in a place you will never know of in any other circumstance. So I decided I wanted to perform and face my demons and make peace with them. I did not want to lose everything fabulous that comes with performing. So my 2 cents to you is, if you are stuck being frozen on whether or not to be performing on a stage, I hope you choose to perform. Because when you present yourself like that, you are not just connecting to art. You are connecting with your ensemble and with your audience. You are inundated with so many kinds of harmonies and rhythmic vibrations. And there is something incredible and bigger than you when you are a part of this kind of harmony and unity. It's the reason people in ballet companies, opera productions, orchestral ensembles, chamber music, jazz trios, rock bands, no matter what, when the run is over, they're sad. There's a bond they've created, and you miss it. For me, even a production that lasts just a couple of weeks, or accompanying choirs for a handful of rehearsals and performances, you can't help but feel akin with all your band and the whole production crew and everyone who's a part of it. And so I hope you realize how much I know what you might be going through, and that you can choose to simplify your life and not do this at all, or you can get back on that horse and start performing no matter how anxious you feel until it becomes part of you. Based on what I've experienced, I believe there's nothing like it. And when people connect with their ensembles and with their audience in harmony, in vibrations, it's good for us and it's good for the world.